Welcome back to Telltale. This video is going to be about the next Philip K. Dick story on our list called Mr. Spaceship. I'm Greg.
I'm Emily.
And
I like this story.
Okay, we already got one good review.
Yes.
This story was published in Imagination Science Fiction in January of 1953. So we've turned the corner and we're into the new year now, his second year publishing stories. So this is the fifth story in order of publication. Exactly which stories he wrote first, I'm getting conflicting information about. Some people say a story called Rug was first, which wasn't published until summer of 53.
Okay.
For whatever reason, the editor sat on it for a year.
Okay.
But it supposedly was sold before he sold anything else.
Oh, interesting.
And there are a couple other stories that were supposedly written before Beyond Lies the Wub, but then were published after Beyond Lies the Wub.
Okay.
So that's why I keep clarifying. This is in order of publication, not in order of being written, because it's too hard for me to figure out what was written first.
Yeah.
So
more
anyway,
quantitative data.
Yeah.
There's something.
So
there's a fly on my face or something.
Oh,
Scared me.
yeah. Gail likes to leave produce on the counter,
Oh,
so we get
no!
fruit flies everywhere.
That's all right.
I yell at her constantly. So, do you want to do the synopsis?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, the synopsis of this is Earth has had Martian conflict for a while, but they have now encountered Martian conflict where it seems like there's an artificial intelligence that has more self-awareness based off of the Johnson
Control.
The Johnson
Where did
Control.
you get that name?
Yeah. Johnson.
Well, Johnson Controls invented control systems like thermostats and such, and manufacturing. As a matter of fact, they were based in Milwaukee for most of their history. It was just a few, like 5 years ago, they were bought out by some European company, but otherwise that came from Milwaukee, and they were very famous worldwide. So that's where
I didn't even know that.
Johnson Control.
I thought Johnson Control was just like arbitrary generic name with the word control after it because like some guy named Johnson. Anyway.
Nope.
So yeah, this basically what it is they basically have encountered these warlike, very combative artificial intelligences that have been attacking them but seem to have like a general ability to choose and
I'm going to correct you a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a little confusing. Specifically, Earth did fight Martians, but that was in the past and resolved.
Yes.
These aliens are from Proxima Centauri, our nearest star system. Alpha, Beta, and Proxima Centauri is a 3-star system that is our closest neighbor. And so these aliens are from there, and they have put up a perimeter around their space at Proxima Centauri, these smart bombs.
Yeah, and they haven't actually had contact with those particular Martians as far as they know. Or as far as the story indicates. Just with these bombs, this minefield essentially, that appears to be some kind of artificially intelligent, sentient things. So they're trying to figure out, like, how do we keep them from attacking us? How do we make contact? How do we, like, tell them, like, they basically feel like they've been at war for centuries, though, because they first had conflict with the first Martians. They've just been in this constant state of intergalactic exploration and war.
Yeah, so they want to get at the aliens at Proxima. They want to get through this smart minefield and attack them at their home to try and end the war. But they can't because the controls in their spaceship are mechanical.
Yes. And
this was 1953, mind you. The controls in their spaceship were entirely mechanical and did not respond fast enough to be able to respond to the movements of these smart bombs.
Yes, and they were based too much in conditional logic. Whereas these other ones seem to be able to pick and choose a little bit more than, say, a computer-based thing. So they're like, there's something extra going on with these aliens. Like, something else is it's like a combination of systems. So then someone brings up the idea, well, why don't we hook up a human brain to a spaceship? They'll think on the fly much faster. than a computer will.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of inner conflict about it because someone who is suggested is the head engineer's old professor. And so he has a lot of inner conflict about it because he's like, I know the old man's really old, obscenely old, if he's alive at all. And so they go and approach this guy when they find out he's alive and get him to essentially agree to become a spaceship.
Yeah.
Really interesting philosophical and ethical conundrums in the midst of all that. But in time of war, as they keep saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. And they did get consent. And so they go ahead with the project and are able to actually basically take this guy's brain out of his body and put it into the spaceship as the controller. But with a few adjustments to the original papers that they were not informed of until test day. Where the brain wanted full control over all operating systems in the spaceship, which had not been the original plan.
Nope.
And they had not known. And of course, the head guy of the military approved it, because, like, why not? What's the worst that could happen? Well, the old man professor ends up jacking the ship.
Yeah, and from here, this is probably kind of spoilery.
Yeah, from here on out, it's kind of spoilery because they go through this. He jacks it while the test team is still on it. This test team has to bail out.
Yeah, because they're afraid of it.
Yeah, they're afraid because they don't know what his rationale is. They don't even give him a chance to explain himself once he figures he can use the intercom to make it an electronic communication.
Mm-hmm.
They just bail and put out a distress signal for another ship to come grab them, and they do, and Mr. Spaceship himself, the professor, runs off into space as the spaceship. And so they head back to the moon. And when they head back to the moon, the head engineer gets a video call saying that your wife, who is separated from, is in the hospital, and it's pretty bad. Like, you need to get back to Earth ASAP. So they put out a distress signal from the moon. Whatever ship passing by can come pick him up. They get a ship coming. He picks it up. It's the professor. He basically faked the whole thing and put out the distress call himself to try and convince the guy so he could talk to him and tell him, hey, I've got this idea. Because I think all war is stupid.
Yeah.
Essentially. And it's a very, like, Adam and Eve creation story idea.
Yeah, for me, that's where the story went downhill. Because that's kind of hokey.
It is a little hokey, and he picks the engineer and his estranged wife that he's separated from to rebuild this planet, which is not so easy of a sell for me. People have complicated lives, and there can be a lot of hurt in a relationship in order, like, to just assume that they'd be able to get back together and be fine with this was awfully presumptuous of this professor in the first place. But basically what he wants to do is try and get a generation of people who have no concept of war whatsoever.
Yeah, basically try to reboot the human race to be less violent.
And so he's taking them out. It ends with him taking them out into space and going to research a couple planets with these two poor people he just jacked who don't even want to be together anymore.
Exactly.
Like, what? So that's kind of, I agree, that's kind of where the
everything was good up until that point for me.
That's where the story starts to kind of deteriorate for me. Unless they could do it on purely scientific basis, perhaps. I mean, you can have sex without love and procreate without love. It makes it harder, I think. It makes it more of an experiment. But the implication was that you two can fall in love again. If your job is what got between you, we just eliminated what got between you.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what this whole thing ended up being. And then they just fly off into the wild, wild west of the universe looking for planets. And that's where the story ends. And so I was like, I felt like there could have been better resolution to this one. I did still like the story overall.
The basic subject of putting this human brain in a spaceship raises so many cool ideas.
Yes.
And cool possible story lines.
I thought he should jack the team, get them through the minefield, and then they meet the aliens and they just find out this was all a big misunderstanding. And they could all be friends.
Well, or the spaceship just being more powerful than everything else, realize his position and just take over.
Yeah. You know? Like, just like turns on the human race.
He can accelerate faster than any spaceships with humans on.
Yeah.
Because anything, there's nothing organic to be splatted on the wall.
Or he goes as first contact and comes back every few years to go and find all these different alien races. Like, I'm coming as the first contact so that we don't have wars anymore. Like this bullshit y'all started. Situation. That's kind of what I was expecting this to do, where he would go out with more empathy and understanding.
Instead, he sets himself up as God and places two people in the Garden of Eden. And
it
now
seems
it's the
a little
oh, come on.
Egocentric, too. Like, you guys just took an egomaniac and put him in a ship and didn't even realize it. Like, this could go downhill very quickly. This could be like The Shining, but in space. Essentially.
Instead, he pulls a C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, just kind of like, oh, these two people need to re-fall in love again. I'm like, that's totally unnecessary. Let them be separated. They're not happy with each other.
I'm probably being a little too harsh. It's a fun story.
It is a really fun story. I did like it. It did fall apart in that for me, but if you lean really heavily on plausible deniability, it actually is a really great story. I like the philosophies in it, where he had the theory that if you have a generation that has no idea what war even is, it won't even be their first instinct.
Yeah.
That it's not innate in people. And I thought that was a really interesting theory, because I come from a religious background of total depravity, where everything is innately evil and learns not to be. So his theory was opposite, where it's like everybody innately wants to be good, but they learn evil over time.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was a really interesting theory. I thought that would be... There are so many ways that could have been played with or expounded upon better. I just felt like the end was kind of a cop-out, though. Yeah. For me.
Yeah.
But the philosophies were cool. And the morality conflict, inner conflict, totally understandable, very relatable. Like, I would not want to be put in that position where somebody I admired, we're going to take your brain out and put it in a spaceship, shoot you into space.
Yeah, well, but as far as that goes, he was at the end of his life. He was about to die anyway.
Yeah. So he's...
no risk.
Yeah.
And if he came through it okay, he would be stronger, faster, more powerful than everyone else.
And at least gain 10...
They only gave him 20 years before the spaceship breaks down. I don't know why it couldn't be repaired.
Yeah.
But for whatever
probably
reason,
expensive going out there and sending someone after it.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, it's just too expensive to go repair it.
Yeah.
For a prototype, anyway, because they were using this as a prototype test thing. No obvious intentions of actually sending him into a combat situation. It was more or less to see if it could be done.
Yeah.
And then hopefully making others in the future if they could find a brilliant enough mind. So this was a entirely hypothetical, like, not even hypothetical. This was an entirely experimental process at this point. Just looking to end the war eventually, but not right now. This was not the be-all, end-all way of doing it. So I thought that was really interesting, too, because, like, computer ethics, man, was my thing in college.
Yeah.
I loved computer ethics. It was so interesting, like, all the medical advances we're making. It's like, you worry so much about if you can, but should you?
And at that time, all those were brand new issues. The only people really putting their minds to those kinds of ethics were science fiction writers. Isaac Asimov and Philip Dick. And, Henry Kuttner. They were all thinking.
And now it's like a reality. Now we're thinking brain manipulation and like body manipulation, body enhancements, things like that. With prosthesis, this is all now like becoming questions we're asking now because it's actually happening.
Yeah.
People are actually choosing to do this. So it's just really interesting to see like the then perspective, which I appreciate the then perspective. Because it really just put everything on the individual.
Right.
It said, you can make this choice. We won't do it without consent. He had full access to all of the paperwork and everything, all the theories, all of the programming, everything to look it over before he made his decision and made his decision. Thankfully, he actually understood what it all was. He got a lawyer involved even and things like that for liability stuff and whatever. Like, it all was very respectfully and ethically done, despite how hard of a decision it was.
Yeah.
But that's, like, the only way I could think of doing it. Nowadays, there's so many, like, extra things that would probably be involved.
Oh, an experiment like this could never be done today because you can't experiment on human beings.
Nope. But if it were to happen,
against the law.
Yeah. But that's the thing. There's black market people who are actually doing it. Like, there was a gentleman who actually went into the underground and did a documentary series on having a health device experimentally put into his arm without anesthesia. Ooh. But it was like this big brick of a thing put into his arm to measure his, like, all his blood work, do all of his temperature control stuff, like, all of it. And I'm like, he did it in a hotel room. Yeah.
But a lot of that science, the reason we got to where we are is because in the past, they did that. They did experiment on people. They did experiment on animals. And now everybody's saying you can't experiment on people. You can't experiment on animals.
Yeah.
How can we move forward? How can we learn more when we can't do these kinds of experiments? You got to try and fail first before you can try and succeed.
Yes. But
the trying and failing is illegal.
Yes.
So we can't move forward.
Yes. And unfortunately, all the information that we do have about averages, like the average amount of time a person can hold their breath underwater, we actually inherited all of that information from Nazi Germany. Most of our medical information about how the human body works was from experimentation because of Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And what was done on people in horrific situations.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that we have to use that science, but that science has been detrimental to huge breakthroughs in medical.
Yeah.
The inner conflict is obvious, and it is very real, and it's a similar situation to this, where he's like, yeah, we're giving this guy the option to consent to this. But should we have, should we have even given him an option? Should we have even proposed this in the first place? Similar situation, where it's like, should it have been done?
As long as it's entirely his choice, I think, sure.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it, too. Like, they did it as respectfully as possible. He knew what he was getting into. He lawyered up even. He did all the stuff. Like, it was a no-brainer, but I understand the head engineer's inner conflict about it. Where he's just
Unlike reality of the 1950s, where they told people, yes, watch our nuclear bomb test. You won't be harmed in any way. And they irradiated all these people.
Yeah, and now everyone has cancer and is dead.
Yeah. Or ended up sterile and couldn't have children.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, so it was just it's just a fascinating story, one, in computer ethics, two, in philosophy. And like this philosophy and religion, it's not even religion, really. It's just philosophy of human nature is so different than what I think a lot of people expected it to be. I thought that was an interesting part, too. But the end was kind of a cop-out to me.
Yeah.
Lacked a little something towards the end there.
Yeah, way too C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Not to knock him, he wrote some good stuff.
Yeah, but still a great story.
Very religious.
Yeah, still a great story. Like, I'd probably give this a solid 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
Because it's a fun adventure. It's really interesting. Brings up a lot of philosophical questions. The stuff that we expect of Philip K. Dick. The romance was weird, but all right.
Yeah. Well, it was 1953.
What did we expect?
Science fiction.
People shouldn't get divorced. They'll ruin their own lives. Fall in love again, damn it.
Back then there were states where it was not really legal.
Yeah. Weird.
So, yeah.
Weird.
Strange time.
Yeah, very strange time.
Anyway, so that's 2 in a row that are a little less than what we expected from Philip Dick. But they're early stories, so maybe,
He's allowed to have some hit or misses, I guess.
He's allowed to...
By my standards, because I'm the standard. No, for me, it was still pretty good, though. It was well written. The dialogue was good. The POV was good. I liked it. It was good stuff. The spaceship was cool.
Yeah. So the next story that we'll be moving on to in the Philip Dick read is called The Defenders. It was published in Galaxy Magazine in January 1953. It is public domain, so you can get it from Project Gutenberg. And the next one after that, Piper in the Woods, is also public domain and available from Project Gutenberg. But the Defenders in particular, it's a novelette. So about as long as Mr. Spaceship. Mr. Spaceship was a novelette also. So not short stories, but not that long. That you can read them in one sitting easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they take nothing. Yeah. Hardly any time to read.
But the basic subject of the Defenders, Philip Dick later in the 1960s expanded it into a novel called The Penultimate Truth.
Ooh.
So it'll be interesting to read this, and then interesting when we get to Penultimate Truth that hopefully I can remember enough of it to do a comparison and contrast.
Hopefully it's quick enough that we could do another really quick read through refresh.
Yeah.
And then, yes.
Well, it is. It's not a super long
excellent
story. And if you have already run out and gotten paycheck like I have, then it's in here. Mm-hmm. Both stories are in here. Piper in the Woods and The Defenders.
So, yeah.
So
thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, comment. Tell us what you love, what you hate.
And come back for The Defenders.
Yes. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.